when we're thinking about public faith, so much about kind of faith and culture and the world, so much really rests on what we think of humans. It might sound obvious, but I think we often miss the point really that what our worldview is about humans really determines so much of our worldview about the culture and the society that they create. And I think the one factor that often causes confusion and a bit of trouble for us as Christians is the idea about original sin. And that's a really important doctrine. Some people now want to get rid of the doctrine of original sin. They want to say that humans really aren't very bad at all. We're a bunch of nice guys really, and this original sin nonsense is just a bit depressing, a bit of a pessimistic take on humanity, and I don't believe that. I think the Bible's clear about our sinfulness. But what gets tricky is this word original. Even though in the book of Romans, for example, there's no one who is right with God, no one who's justified before God, all have sinned. But this word original, that can mean different things to us, and I think it's where we get in trouble. Because one way of understanding original sin is to think that original means primary, kind of basic, that this is the foundations of our humanity, that we are originally sinful before we're anything else. And I don't think that's true. In fact, if we look at the Bible story of Genesis, when God creates man and woman and the rest of creation, he says that creation is very good. So originally, in the first place, humans are good creatures created to worship and to love God. Sin comes in next. It's the second act of our history. And we might want to think about that in terms of a fall. The fall happened, but to have a fall, you have to have somewhere to fall from. So I think as humans, we need to understand that our original nature is not sinful, but is good. We were good before we were sinful. We were created to worship and serve God before we were corrupted by sin. And I think the impact of that is kind of huge, really, because if we get that wrong, then we misunderstand what basic human nature is. Even that phrase that we often say, human nature, to talk about our failings, oh, I lied the other day, well, it's just human nature. But a Christian worldview would say, actually, no. True human nature is to serve and love God. And I say more about this in the podcast, but I just want to talk a little bit about natural law. The idea that if our true nature is to worship and serve God, and if sin is something that happens afterwards, then what's common in us humans, what we tend to do, is often not natural. It doesn't fit with our natures, but is a corruption of our natures. For me to tell a lie is not natural. It might be very common, but it's not natural. What is natural is to live the way God intended me to live, and to worship him in truth. And I think as Christians we have to hold on to this, really, because otherwise, when we tell people about the love of God, and when we say to people that living God's way is the best way, we can also say living God's way is the best way because it's the natural way. It's the way we were meant to function. When I obey God, I'm not trying really hard to overcome my sort of what I'm meant to be. No, I'm trying really hard to overcome the sin that stops me being who I'm meant to be. So, to obey the natural law, to obey God's law, is actually to be my true self, to behave naturally. Unfortunately, it's just not that common. And I think hopefully this little video might help you to sort out some of that language, really, because sin has touched every part of us. There's no part of us that's free from sin. But we must make sure that we don't start thinking that sin is more fundamental than our createdness by God. And if we can do that, then we have some space to develop a public hope which can say that although sin's ravages are terribly destructive, because they're not our most basic nature, there is hope. So I hope that makes some sense. I hope that explains a bit of language, and maybe you can join me on a Zoom if you want to talk a bit more about that. God bless.